Yeah. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Reproductive Care Conversations. I'm Ola Davis.
And hi, I'm Yasmin Usmani. Thank you for joining us for episode number 2. Last time we kicked off our series with a discussion about accessibility to fertility care. And today we're diving deeper into a new topic, embryo adoption.
Yes, so we're thrilled to have two wonderful guests with us here from Beginnings Family Services. It's an organization that supports both donors and recipients through the embryo adoption process. So with us we have Elaine and Sheena, and they both work hands-on with the individuals and families that navigate embryo adoption and donation, and we're excited to learn more from them. So let's jump in.
Thank you so much for joining us. And if we could start, could you tell us a little bit about yourselves and your backgrounds and how you found yourselves working at such a wonderful program?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Sheena. You can start us off.
So I'm Sheena Radicic. My background, I've always been had a love of social work, so that's where I started in university and got my degree in social work. From there, I gravitated towards child welfare and spent some time working with at-risk youth, specifically with domestic violence, and supporting families through that. And then I spent some time volunteering specifically at hospice, where I found like a love of grief work was something that I really found a lot of connection to. And then actually a dear friend of mine who works at Beginnings as well told me about an opening in the embryo donor recipient program. And it really sparked my interest because it was something I'd never heard of before. And that's always something that's fascinating to me. And so I did some research on it, went for an interview, and really the rest is history. I fell in love with the program, and it's been something I've been doing for just over a year now. And it's something that I've found a lot of passion for.
That's great.
And I'm Elaine Falzon. I'm the Embryo Donor Recipient Program Manager at Beginnings. And in my role, I oversee the embryo donation program and support intended parents through the process. I provide implications counseling. I work closely with fertility clinics like yours and ensure that all the processes meet Health Canada requirements. So my journey to this role has been one that's personal. I'm a social worker like Sheena as well, but I went through my own fertility journey in the late 90s and went through IVF, and I had a lot of connection to other families who were growing their families through either traditional adoption or assisted reproduction. So I adopted my daughter in 2000 and stayed doing the work mostly through adoption. And I started as a counselor with Beginnings for their implications counseling for embryo recipients and embryo donors. And now the program manager, and I've been doing this about a year and a half. It's coming up to 2, and I'm very excited about all the babies that are being born. It really makes us feel like the program is working, and we're there to give prospective parents another option as they're going through their journey to create a family. Yeah.
Process. Yeah, thank you for sharing your background with us.
I remember reading an article some time ago, and in the United States, do they refer to embryo donation as like snowflake babies? Is that a
Yes.
term that you've heard?
Yes.
So for Canadians who are seeking their own little snowflake baby, can you let us know a little bit about the Beginnings program and how one engages and the process?
Sure. So our program started, just so everyone knows, it started in 2010. The embryo donor program started. So we have another program which is infant adoption, and so the agency as a whole has been around since 1984. So the embryo donor recipient program started in 2010, and it was for donors who were looking at other options for what to do with remaining embryos. They've completed their families and they were not happy with sort of the options that were made available to them. So we provided a platform where they can register with us, and recipients could register with us, or intended parents could register with us, and then they can do a mutual selection process. So maybe Sheena can expand on how we do the process now, and it can explain, because it's sort of like two. We have our donor process, and then we have our recipient process, and then we have, once they're matched, there's another process that we then guide our clients through.
Yeah, absolutely. Sheena, can you take us, maybe start with the donor process?
Yeah, absolutely. So if someone was interested in becoming a donor with us, the first step is just to reach out to us. Usually you can go on our website and you can find our info account, which is info@beginnings.ca, and send us a message. From there, we will receive an inquiry package that outlines both the donor and the recipient process, so you get a little bit of information about both, and it gives you step-by-step of what our process looks like. I also send a follow-up email personally to everyone who inquires with us, asking them if they have any questions. They're welcome to ask us with no obligation to move forward. We also are willing to set up consult calls with donors, especially if they have a couple of questions and they're just wondering a little bit more about the process. We're happy to do that too before they register with us. If they'd like to move forward at that point, we ask that they fill out registration paperwork. That paperwork includes a consent to the fertility clinic, it includes a service agreement and some background information about them. The consent to the fertility clinic is what allows us to contact their fertility clinic and get some information that we need to move forward to ensure that they're even eligible for our program. That includes the embryology report, infectious disease blood work, and freeze-thaw protocol. Once we have all of their information back from the clinic, that's when we're going to set up a consultation call with them. These calls are usually about an hour, and they're with one of our program staff, and that's where we really walk donors through the whole process. So we're going to answer any questions that they have, we're going to get some information about their background fertility history, and we're going to walk them through each step of the way. We are sort of screening for things like their readiness to donate. We want to make sure that they understand what the process looks like. And that it's mutual selection. That's something that we really highlight to our donors, and that there's no obligation to move forward. That's a really important piece to remember, is if the donors come for a consultation and they decide that this isn't the right program for them, there's no pressure to move forward, and we never want anyone to feel pressured to move forward. If after the consultation they feel comfortable moving forward, the next step would be implications counseling with us. The purpose of implications counseling is, one, it's mandatory for clinics and for doing third-party reproduction, but it's also, we want to make sure that the donors understand the implications of their genetic child being raised outside of their family, and making sure that they're ready, making sure that there's no signs of coercion, talking to them about openness, because that's a huge piece of our program. What does the relationship with the recipient family look like? Our program is open, meaning that the very minimum for us is required is that donors and recipients share contact information and agree to keep that information updated, as well as to share medical information upfront, as well as to keep that updated in the future too. Because if something, if there's something going on with the donor's children, that could certainly impact the recipient's children, and vice versa. After that, really and truly, the sky's the limit in terms of openness. They could just have that minimum, or some people are looking for more of an extended family kind of relationship where they're having a few updates a year. Some people are hoping to meet in person, or for children to have the opportunity to meet. So it really depends on each donor and each recipient. So going back to the implications counseling, once that counseling is completed, we write up a psychosocial report and an implications counseling report, and at that point the donor would be ready for the next matching round.
Okay, so it's a really rigorous process, it sounds like.
Mm-hmm.
I know that it's an option that we discuss with our patients all the time when they're wondering what to do with embryos that they don't plan to transfer to cells.
Yes.
The options we usually present are, keeping them frozen until you decide what you want to do. Second would be donating the embryos to research, and not to cause a pregnancy in the future or to, you know, have implantation, but it's more to train junior embryologists on things like biopsy or thaw, freeze. What else might you do with the research side of things?
That is mostly it. So thawing, we could test out new media. So we could use, one cohort of embryos. We know they are from, the same freeze, the same genetics, and then we would test out one media versus another. So
Okay.
yeah, and then otherwise like training new embryologists, as you mentioned. So for biopsy, thawing and refreezing.
That's helpful
Yeah,
for us to
yeah.
know.
We present our, discarding the embryos, which is what I understand, just taking it out of the cryo, letting it warm to room temperature, and that's
Yeah.
considered discarding. And then we also do compassionate transfers too, where patients feel strongly about still kind of having a moment of closure, transferring to self, but we would do it at a suboptimal time of the cycle, like during menstrual cycle or into the vagina versus the uterus. There's different ways that we discuss as options to do with our patients. And so definitely donating the embryos is an incredibly selfless act, and we've had a number of patients come through that have linked with Beginnings and received donor embryos, and what a blessing, such a selfless act. So, and I do understand this kind of mutual selection and almost like a little bit of a negotiation for the openness, and I think it can go very well for some people. Absolutely.
Yeah. Can you tell us more about that matching process?
Yes, sure. I will explain how the recipients will present themselves. It's we highlight it in a way that's very similar to how our infant adoption program works, in the sense that our recipients, they will go through the same that Sheena said. They'll have a consult with us. They will do the implications counseling, but they also create a profile book, an electronic one, which has pictures and highlights interests. If they have family pictures, what their home looks like. It's a real representation of who they are and their values and what they're looking for, and a little bit about what they're hoping openness can look like. Sheena will then have what we have are called matching rounds, and they're usually quarterly. They start in January, and I'll let Sheena explain, because she's way better at explaining it than I am, in terms of how that looks and how the mutual selection process is able to happen.
Yes. As Elaine mentioned, our selection rounds are generally in January, April, July, and October, a ballpark. Sometimes it shifts slightly. Each matching round begins with all of the recipients who are already in our program receiving all of the donor profiles who are already in our program. So a donor profile is an anonymous donor profile that we have created about each donor. It includes information about their age, race and ethnicity, religion, a little bit about openness, about their fertility journey, and it includes information on extended family health history as well, because part of the donor process is that they fill out a questionnaire that screens for genetic conditions in both themselves and their extended family. So any information that we have there, it's going to be included in the donor profile. In the donor profile, it also includes how many embryos are available, the grading of the embryos, how old the female donor was at the time of embryo creation, and when the embryos were created, in what year. We also, as sort of a flag for people, if there was a media that was used that is somewhat more uncommon, perhaps it was like, just not a common media, we're going to flag it in the donor profile with the note that says if the recipient is interested in that particular donor, that we will contact the clinics to see if clinics will work with that media.
Context there, Sheena, if somebody's listening. So what we're talking about here is like the basically fluid, the special cryoprotectant fluid that was used to freeze the embryos. Sometimes that could be specific to what a certain clinic was using and may not be compatible with the thawing media of another clinic. And so that's why you would care to point that out and to contact the clinics. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's really helpful. You explained it way better than I could have. The other thing we flag too is if the embryos were slow frozen. That's another thing we flag because, again, some clinics aren't able to work with slow frozen embryos. So we include all of that information. We also do a little bit about the openness that someone's looking for. So it's just going to be short form, but if they're looking for just contact and medical information, or if they're looking for a more extended type of relationship. So from those profiles, we give recipients about 7 to 10 days to decide which of those donor profiles they're interested in presenting to. So we usually ask that if we were to send them a bunch of profiles, I don't expect that they're going to want to match with every single donor. If they do, I'm going to challenge them a little bit of like, is that someone you really do want to have a lifelong connection to? Because the reason is when we get all of the recipients' choices back, we take a look at what donor has the most interest, and we decide what donor we're going to present to first. We only ever present to one donor at the same time unless there's no overlap. The reason for that is that I don't ever want to present a recipient to 2 donors and then both donors want that person, and then I have to let a donor know that that's no longer an option, because it really is setting everybody up. So we present to one donor at a time. When we're doing the donor presentations, we send them those books that Elaine was talking about that every recipient has created. They also send those books to us, and we give them a lot of feedback. So if someone sends me a profile book, I might say, you know, you might want to highlight this a little bit more. You might want to make sure you include this just to make sure it's really reflective of them. So the donor receives all of the profiles of any recipient who's interested in matching with them. The donor then has usually about 7 to 10 days as well to make a decision if there's anyone there that they'd like to move forward with. If there is someone they'd like to move forward with, the first step is that we're going to give them a call, and we're going to read them the report that's been generated on those recipients. So that's going to give them, because while these profile books are beautiful, we want to give them a lot more information to make this really important decision with. So we're going to read them the psychosocial report as well as the implications report of the recipient. At that point, if they wanted to continue moving forward, the next step is we repeat that exact same process with the recipients. So we're going to give the recipients a phone call, and that report that was generated on the donors, we're going to read that to them so that they have a lot more than just 2 pages to decide if they want to move forward with this donor. If everyone wants to move forward, the next step is the first meeting. So the first meeting is, I often refer to it as like an awkward blind date, because it's, you know, everybody's really, really nervous going in, including both donors and recipients, which sometimes people are surprised that donors are nervous as well. And it's really an opportunity where people get to meet in person / via Teams. And they get to know each other a little bit. They talk about some of their commonalities and why they chose each other, but the focus of that meeting and the foundation of our program is truly openness. We're talking about what the relationship looks like moving forward, what everybody's hoping for, what does contact look like, what does it look like during the transfer period, what does it look like ongoing, all of that kind of stuff. We also, in that first meeting, talk about what happens with leftover embryos, because that is a really important consideration. And some donors feel very, very strongly that they don't ever want any of their embryos destroyed. So that's a really important piece that we talk about. From this meeting, we then have everyone after the meeting, they email us separately to let us know if they wanted to continue moving forward. The reason we ask for that, because I don't want to in a meeting put pressure on somebody to say that they want to move forward or have to say no in that kind of environment. So we want to make it a safe place where they can let us know what their decision is. If everyone wanted to continue moving forward, the next step is signing some consent forms for clinics, both donors and recipients clinics, as well as for the 2 clinics to communicate with one another, and then for donors and recipients to sign consents for each other. We also, from this first meeting, are going to draft an openness agreement, which is a good faith agreement. It's not legally binding, but it's an agreement that we hope that people will honor. That's really like a starting point of their relationship, what everyone's promising to do moving forward. After the first meeting, we also provide more information to people in writing, so each person receives a copy of the other's report. So they get a copy of that, and then recipients receive a copy of the embryology report, which they often can't read, but that's okay. They can bring it to their clinic. And they also receive a copy of the donor's questionnaire.
Thank you, Shannon.
Yeah.
Well, that is like a rigorous process. You know, you want to make sure that the donors and recipients both are on the same page in all those aspects, and both know exactly what they're signing up for and going into.
One thing I'd like to highlight, though, is
Oh, go ahead, Elaine. Sorry.
yeah, sorry. One thing I wanted to highlight was that there isn't any fees for donors to be in our program. So
That's a common question. Thank you, Elaine.
yes, so that's important. But they must know that their donation is altruistic. It's a donation. We do review the the Health Canada rules and the Assisted Human Reproduction Act with them so that they are aware, and we make sure that we're not setting them up for a situation where they're going to do something illegal. That's why we also have what's called a pre-match protocol, because there are some people that come to us after they've maybe connected on social media and they say, oh, we have a match, but they're not really sure of what to do next. And we've seen situations where the matches ended up not going through because they've realized that it really wasn't a good match for them. So we also support people if they've connected outside of our program.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think we've had a case similar where we've had people connect and we introduce them to beginnings because we don't have the process in-house to help with these steps that Sheena's outlined and the Health Canada compliance in that way. But once we have the embryos, we definitely know what to do. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
How many embryos would you say are kind of available for adoption in a given iteration?
That can vary. There are times when, we always have usually about a two recipients to one donor ratio. And our minimum requirement per donor for donation is a minimum of 2 embryos. So, for example, we have matching round starting in January, and I can't remember the numbers, Sheena, of how many donors we have. But some donors can have up to 11, 12 embryos. That's not common, but what they may do is decide to split those embryos amongst more than one recipient family. So there's usually about each round. What would you say, Sheena? What's in our next round in January? We have.
I think it's about 13 to 14 donors. It really depends. Like Elaine says, we're usually about a 1 to 2 ratio of donors to recipients. We were earlier last year, we were more of a 1 to 1.
Yeah.
It really it's always shifting, it's always changing. So it's a difficult question to answer. But yeah, it's always changing. And like Elaine said, if a donor comes in with multiple embryos and they're choosing to separate them, that is something that would also be very clearly noted on the donor profile. And it's not something that we actually do the divide either. We consult with an embryologist who does the split to make it more equitable, because we are not medical professionals and we don't want to give that illusion. We are social workers, so we rely on consulting in the community when we have a medical thing like that come up.
The process, like the matching process, I'm not sure if the timing would vary situation to situation, but is there like an average length of time from the beginning of the matching to having, a donor and a recipient matched?
So if there isn't really a way to predict that, because we can't guarantee a match, right? So, we are happy to say that, the majority, I think, of the people, the recipients that come to us do find a match. It's whether or not it's in the first round or not. So if they were to match in the first round, and again, we're estimating because we can't control, the fertility clinic scheduling, we can't control the legal piece, but it's the actual matching round itself, can take about 2 to 3 months.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, from start to finish, really.
Donation itself is altruistic. But there are some costs usually in and around, generating the legal agreements, etc. Are you able to kind of speak to the legal side of things and maybe ballpark of the costs that patients would encounter?
Sorry. So one thing I would say before the legal agreement is completed, one step so right after the first meeting, after we've signed all of those consents, the really important next step is clinic approval. So that is a step where recipients, I'm going to send all of the information over to the recipient's clinic, and it's going to include the embryology, the infectious disease, the media, implications counseling as well. And the reason for that is that, again, we are not medical professionals, we're social workers, so we want people to be speaking to their medical team to confirm that this is the right plan for them, to confirm that the clinic can accept the embryos into the program. That's something that I'll sort of work with the clinic on the back end with the lab, but we want recipients to meet with their team to really discuss the medical aspects. If there's anything in the blood work that they should know about that would have been flagged on the donor report, but talking about those sort of things on a medical level is really, really. After the recipients have received medical approval, so what we do is we send them a list of lawyers that we've worked with in the past, and they're welcome to choose from that list, or they can select a lawyer of their own choosing. We just highly, highly recommend that lawyer specializes in fertility law, the Assisted Human Reproductive Act, and embryo donation specifically, because sometimes people say, oh, my friend's a real estate lawyer, and that's wonderful, but it's really not the appropriate lawyer to have for these sort of things. So the recipient selects their lawyer, and then we're going to send that list to the donors as well, and they're going to select a lawyer. The donor's lawyer is going to directly invoice the recipient, so the donors do not get charged for that piece at all. And so the lawyers are then going to go back and forth until everybody's happy with the legal agreement, and then the legal agreement would become finalized.
Are the costs, a lot of people kind of, when they're considering donor egg versus donor embryo, they kind of want some comparison of costs between the legals and the donor embryo process, and then a whole donor egg cycle. Do you know kind of roughly if a donor egg cycle is around $25,000, what the legal kind of generation costs would be?
So what I can say is that embryo donation is a lot less expensive than for an intended parent to go through egg donation. We're nowhere even close to 20,000. But so we have our fees, and they are outlined and provided in the information package when someone reaches out to us. Right away, they'll know exactly what our fees are, and we invoice after a service is completed. So if they are not matched in the round, they're not going to have to pay the full fee. So they may pay for the consultation, they'll pay for the implications counseling, but they won't. But that would be it, right? Once they are matched, then they will pay our final fee. Lawyers, I think that's the question that you were asking specifically. I mean, we can't speak to it, but we know that it's usually between 3,000 plus, but it's nowhere. What we do know is that it's nowhere near what an egg donation cost is. Yeah.
That's really helpful.
That's helpful. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to switch gears a little bit. If it's okay, and without naming any specifics, do you have a story that you can share with us that really stuck with you, or that could illustrate kind of the heart of what Beginnings does?
Geez, we had, when you think of one, Sheena,
I know it's hard without saying any specifics.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
You passing
away.
Yeah.
Might be difficult to answer.
Yeah, I totally appreciate that.
It's hard to choose too, because there's so many beautiful stories. One that stands out for me in particular was a pre-match, actually. And the donor was part of our program and hadn't found a match, but they actually found a pre-match, which sometimes makes us a little nervous because we're not sure what's going to happen. But it was really and truly like the most beautiful relationship has developed. You know, they've become friends. You know, they had their own first meeting before we even did their first meeting. Like it was really like a beautiful thing to witness and to be a part of, just to watch this beautiful relationship develop, and you know the potential that there could be children that are related to one another, and they're going to really be fostering this openness. So that one to me really stands out. But there's a lot, right? We had a first meeting in person that really kind of stands out to me as well too, because it's not typical because our program's national. We don't often get the opportunity to meet our clients in person, so that one was really special as well too, just because again it was like they're looking for more like extended family. And you know, when they were communicating back and forth after the first meeting, they kept us on the email, so we got to witness this beautiful relationship developing just as spectators, and to me like that was really special.
Yeah, and
Oh, I can imagine also that the degree of openness, like there may be some cases where genetic siblings are raised kind of almost like cousins or like friends of the family, and to grow up with a knowledge of each other and an appreciation and relationship with each other. That's so nice.
yeah.
Hmm.
I think for me, without sort of picking one, because as Sheena said, there's so many. We love it when we hear good news, and we're also very supportive of our families, regardless of outcome. We have support groups that we offer at no cost for families who have worked with us. And they're actually peer led. So we have donors and recipients who are co-chairs who run the support group. So it's a really nice community to be part of. But I think for me, the most rewarding part of this work is supporting people through the meaningful and emotional journey that they're on. It's, you know, we tend to focus a lot on the recipients and their outcomes, but it's also powerful to see the donors find that peace and that purpose in their decision. And again, as we said, like in the intended parents moving closer to achieving their dream, right, of becoming parents. So I think knowing that our work is helping create families in a thoughtful, compassionate, and ethical way, and that it has an impact on the children born, right, through embryo donation. So it's really fulfilling, I think, for both Sheena and I to be part of their journey.
It's a beautiful summary, and I think we feel very privileged to be part of the process in whatever capacity, you know. You do very meaningful work, absolutely. Would you happen to have a ballpark of how many kind of children were conceived from the beginnings donor embryo process?
Yes, so we recently had a birth announcement and a pregnancy announcement. So we're at 97 babies. So yeah, so we're gearing up for 100. And I
Big
do,
celebration.
yeah, yeah. So I do want to say that we do get this question a lot, because we do sometimes have people coming wondering whether or not, if they require a surrogate, if they can be part of our program, and the answer is yes. So if intended parents are requiring the services of a surrogate, then they can also work with our program, because I think we've just started that. So there might be information out there that it's not, but we have opened that up, and so we're hoping we can have more babies born.
I
Yeah.
think you've answered a lot of questions that like would help us also
Counsel and
our
inform our
patients.
patients. No, it's wonderful. I know that traditionally we work closely with a lady named Mary,
Yes.
who I think was part of Beginnings before.
Yes.
I used to see, well, before COVID, you know, at all of the kind of conferences and whatnot. Since I've started, I know that our clinic's been very supportive of Beginnings and intend to far into the future. You do wonderful work.
Well, so do you guys. That's for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Okay, well, we really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us. We appreciate what we've learned. I hope
Oh,
someone
yeah.
watching has learned something from you as well. So thank you again, and we will talk soon.